Okay, Your Worship, please proceed.
Thank you very much. It is, I don't know exactly what time it is. It's on or about 6:30. I have 6:31, and I'll call this special council meeting to order. Our open session will be taking place with me in council chambers, Councillor Tadman, and our planner, Mr. Walsh, in council chambers. All other members of council are in the municipal center in various offices in order to both physically distance, but also so that we can have this Zoom meeting work. And I would ask everyone to please mute for now. Because we get some pretty bad feedback when we don't. When the closed session happens, council will be convening in council chambers for everybody's information. We will be physically distanced at 6 feet apart, which essentially takes up the entire room, just so the public is aware of the configuration in here. So I would ask for a motion. Sorry, I don't need to do that because we've had them signed this evening. So I have a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Vink, seconded by Councillor Anderson, that council amend the agenda to add revised parking control bylaw to 4.3 of the agenda, and we have received a report this evening. And further, that the closed session becomes item 4.1. This will require a 2/3 majority vote for an addition to this agenda, as it would be considered an urgent matter if that's the case. So, although any discussion on that? All those in favor, just raise your hands. Are there any opposed? The motion is carried. And I have a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Vink and seconded by, not sure, Councillor Anderson, that council approves the August 6, 2020 special council meeting agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion is carried. I'll ask members of council if you have any declarations of pecuniary interest, and if so, please state the general nature thereof. There are none noted. Which takes us to our first item in our special council meeting, which is an item to amend the procedural bylaw to permit meetings like this, essentially electronic participation of council meetings. And I have a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Vink, seconded by Councillor Anderson. The council receives the report from the municipal clerk for information purposes, and the council authorized the preparation of a bylaw to be endorsed and presented to council at a regular council meeting to allow for the electronic participation of council meetings to continue, and that council direct the municipal clerk to review the procedural bylaw and bring back the necessary changes and recommendations to council in order to reflect the continued use of electronic participation at future council meetings, and a review of the additional changes to the Municipal Act, including the use of proxy voting at council meetings. Is there any discussion? Councillor LeBlanc, please unmute yourself.
When you when you talk about proxy vote, what are you meaning by that?
Well, the Municipal Affairs, Ministry of Municipal Affairs is permitting councils to use proxy voting, so it would be depending on how we write it in our procedural bylaw. My understanding of the legislation, it would allow a member of council to be absent from a meeting, but permit another member of council to hold their vote for them. So that's a point of discussion we'll have to have if it's considered and brought forward at that time.
Okay, no, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
And the purpose of this motion is we were, of course, allowed to have these meetings under the provincial emergency, but now that the provincial emergency is lifted, the ministry has decided we should be able to continue these meetings, obviously not just through the pandemic, but for future use. So that's why we are considering this at this time. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion is carried. That brings us to item 4.2, the appointment of the Quinny Arts Council Roundtable. And I would ask for a motion that council appoint Councillor Anderson to the Quinny Arts Council Roundtable. You have been presented with a letter in front of you. Councillor Anderson did make this announcement at our last meeting or the meeting before, I can't recall which one, that he was planning to attend. And I think it would be appropriate so that he can properly represent the community for us to actually appoint him to that roundtable. So are you making the motion, Councillor Rowley?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Tadman? Is there any discussion? All those in, go ahead, Councillor LeBlanc.
So, through your honor, I read this letter. So we have are we part of the Northumberland Arts Committee? And so this is what we're going to join as the Quinte West Arts Committees. Is there any fees or anything that we pay for this?
My understanding, but I'll get Councillor Anderson to chime in. My understanding is this is a roundtable for discussion about the arts in the Quinte region, and there's no cost associated with this. But Councillor Anderson, could you speak to that, please?
No, that's fine.
You're muted, Ron.
Thank you. Mayor, I think I can confirm that this is, I won't say just a roundtable, it's an important roundtable taking up Prince Edward County, Hastings County, our area, Brighton as such. And it's bringing it all together, trying to rejuvenate a little bit of support and interest back to the Quinte arts, all types of arts, music, performing arts, visual arts, literary arts. So this roundtable is going to be new to me. However, the Quinte Arts Council is not new to me. I've been sort of connected as a supporter for a number of years. And I would like to see Brighton. We have a lot of fine artists and arts people and new people that have come to town in the last few years. And I think we had a very strong arts community association or arts council at one time. And I know there's people out there doing things. I'm not going to touch on any individual efforts that are being taken place, but I think we need to bring it together. And I think by being approached for us to be part of the big picture like Quinte Arts Council is great. And we've got nothing to lose by trying to support all the arts and the culture in the area. So I'm happy to take part in this.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Rowley, did you have a question?
Not a question. I just wanted to make a comment as well. Anything that we could do regionally with minor cost and much interest from this council or from members of council, I think is a positive thing.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc.
Yes, through your mayor to Ron. Congratulations on, and it was a very nice letter asking you to attend for this, and it's good that Brighton participates in it. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Anything further from members of council? All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That motion is carried. And we look forward to hearing back from you on what happens at the roundtable, Councillor Anderson. The next item is the revised parking control bylaw prohibiting parking Prescale Parkway from Ontario Street to Provincial Park entrance and Huff Road south of Lakeshore Road. This is from the Director of Planning and Development, Mr. Walsh. I don't see him in the room anymore, and I don't see him on the screen. Ah, there he is. You'll have to unmute. For those watching on YouTube, Mr. Walsh is appearing tonight as Ms. Doran.
I wear many hats.
There you are. So, Mr. Walsh, because we haven't had a chance to really go through this report, it was on our desks this evening when we arrived, I'd ask you to please take us through it.
Yes, Mayor, Council. The report speaks to some parking issues that have been reported to staff as being problematic along some certain roads, specifically along Prescale Parkway from Ontario Street to the Provincial Park entrance, and along Huff Road, south of Lakeshore Road to Lake Ontario. And there were some complaints that came in over the weekend, last couple of weekends, in fact, a lot of congestion, a lot of parking along the shoulders of the roads. The roads that really aren't adequate for roadside parking, that there's really not a lot of shoulders on these roads. So they are very congested, and you add to that a lot of pedestrian traffic as well alongside the roadways. And it makes for a very problematic vehicle and pedestrian movement, and in general, perhaps not an altogether safe situation. So the enforcement officer has provided a report, that's attachment 1. Attachment 2 is a recommended amending bylaw. The amending bylaw would introduce some prohibited parking along those road segments as described. The draft bylaw is recommended to be for a temporary period of time so that we come back to council again in September and report on some public consultation that we will have executed by that time, and we can bring back a complete report and perhaps some revised provisions in the zoning in the prohibited parking bylaw for council's further consideration. Staff felt that it was important to have some public consultation because those road allowances do relate to waterfront areas. And of course, waterfront areas are a very big attraction to the public at large. And so having open, transparent decisions on the parking issue probably is warranted and merits this matter. The recommendation is that we bring in parking signs, no parking signs, to be enforceable. We will need those signs. And so there is a cost element to that. You'll see that the costs are about $3,100 for the materials and about $2,000 for installation. The numbers, so the quote is from our sign supplier out of Campbellford, and the number of signs and the specifications for the signs are in accordance with provincial standards and specifications. There is the issue of getting staff resources on those sites when there is a reported parking concern or problem. OPP aren't always available as to the degree that's desired. They do their best, but it looks like we might need some added resources from time to time. And we looked at different options, but we felt that for this period of time, it might be appropriate to have the bylaw enforcement officer on a call-out basis. So he would be in a standby situation during the next little while and during the remaining summer and early fall months, and be compensated on a call-out basis. We feel that's probably the most appropriate and most affordable thing, given that this may be a very short-term problem. We don't know. And that's the other reason why we're recommending a temporary style bylaw at this time, because historically there hasn't been this degree of complaint or reported problem. So we would like to monitor the situation further and report back to council. I'm a bit available for any questions that might be raised.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. So I will read the motion, and we may want to make some changes to it as we move forward, but I'll read the motion, see if we get a mover and seconder, and then I'll open the floor for discussion. The recommended motion is as follows: that council receive the director's report regarding prohibiting parking along select roadway segments, that council receive the bylaw enforcement officer's report regarding the same, being attachment 1, that council authorize staff to initiate public consultation regarding the temporary bylaw for a period of 2 weeks, after which staff will report to council regarding findings, that the bylaw presented at this session of council be enacted for the temporary period from August 7th, 2020 until September 21st, 2020. In order to add enforcement resources during peak times on weekends and after hours, the bylaw enforcement officer is recommended to be subject to on-call duty for 3 weeks on a call-out basis. This involves standby pay and call-out pay for actual calls. And that was moved by Councillor Rowley and seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. So I will open the floor for discussion, and I saw Councillor Tadman's hand up.
The one question I wanted to ask, because I was asked by a resident over on Huff Road, there's a barrier at the bottom of the road. Is that for public use? Some of the residents think that it's not open for the public to go onto the water, and it's quite dangerous now because some of the people have had their shoreline engineered, and there's big rock there, so it could be quite dangerous. So I think we better check to see if that is a public area that people can use. Yes.
The southerlymost portion of Huff Road past Popham Lane.
Yeah, right at the bottom.
Yeah.
There is a barrier there.
So, Mr. Walsh, I guess that's a question for you, because the temporary bylaw would enforce it to the edge of Popham Lane, but the roadway goes further south, essentially into the water. Although there is a barrier there, the road allowance goes into the water, and it would be my preference and recommendation that we make all of that portion south of Lakeshore on Huff Road no parking, because there was significant picnicking going on at that location, I think is a fair way to say it.
Okay. It's a good question, Mayor, to Council. The road allowance, as you described, does go all the way to the water. So there is, in effect, a roadway, whether it's fully open all the, south of Huffman, I don't know. But it is, as public are allowed to travel over that. There is vehicle barricade at the termination because of the drop off into the water. So there's no turnaround per se, as you might normally find in a snowplow turnaround situation. But it is an open road allowance, as the mapping shows. And so that is what people are taking advantage of in order to afford access to the water.
So could we amend the attachment to read for Huff Road that says Huff Road both sides, Lakeshore to the southern extremity, or to the Lakeshore?
To the Lakeshore, yes. So that would be schedule 1 to the amending bylaw. Row number 27, column entitled 2. Revised from Popham Lane to the termination of Huff Road.
I'm going to write that into the motion, if that's okay with Councillors Rowley and LeBlanc.
We just want Huff Road though up to Lakeshore.
Yeah, so we're going to do both sides, Lakeshore to the shoreline.
Side, okay.
From Lakeshore to the shoreline. Any other questions from members of council? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of questions. There was a fair bit of, I believe, violation of parking along the Harbor Street parquet. Will that be included in a little bit of extra enforcement as well? As I believe that there are already no parking signs in that area, but that posed quite a problem over the weekend as well. So the on-call thing or call out, I know, could that area be added to that as well? As far as call out goes, if I recall how call out used to work for several years, does that mean every time the bylaw officer gets call out, he gets the premium for those few hours? Is it per day, or is it going to be per call? If he gets called once an hour, we're looking at a day's pay in an hour and a half.
Mr. Walsh.
Yeah, there is a standard call out rate, the percentage of the hourly or per diem rate that the employee is compensated. I don't know that exact procedural policy, but I can look into that. But typically, it's a minimum of X number of hours per call out.
Councillor LeBlanc.
Okay. Through you, Chair, to Mr. Walsh. Instead of having a call out, what about giving them 2 days off during the week and having them full time on the weekends instead of having call outs? Because once somebody's established on one of these no parking, leaves their vehicles and goes to the beach, what's the next step? How's the bylaw officer going to find them if they're there walking? Because that's what happened when 2 weekends ago. It took me 15 minutes to move 300 yards. And they were just open the doors and they were all walking into the park with their picnic baskets. So once they're established and you call them out, he's got to come back in from Smithfield. Why not give him the 2 days to stay in that area? Just a question.
Walt.
To the mayor, through the mayor to council. That's a good question, and we can follow up on other options for adding and distributing those resources. Be some commitments in collective agreements to what we can do, not do based on those obligations and previous commitments. But we can take a look at those details, and I can confer with those more familiar with those arrangements.
Councillor Anderson.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor LeBlanc, I think you're absolutely right. I can't see why we can't schedule one of our enforcement bylaw. We have 3 right now, temporary, 2, and our bylaw officer, that somebody can't be on site for 2 days of the week and for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
So just a quick reminder, the chief and fire chief were deputized as bylaw officers to enforce the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, which has now been lifted. So they are no longer, they are bylaw officers under the law for the fire marshal's office, but they are no longer to be enforcing the MCPA because the MCPA is not in effect at the moment. So
Okay.
we are down to 1 bylaw enforcement officer, and
Okay.
we've already heard staff say they will work within the collective agreement to make sure that there's enforcement opportunities for the weekends, especially during our concerning times. Carry on though, Councillor Anderson. I interrupted.
Just to get back on that, then, if we, I agree with you. I wasn't sure of their capacities, but if the bylaw officer can't be there on weekends, we should maybe be hiring a temporary enforcement officer, being an OPP. If we need to hire for those few weeks an officer to do that, I believe it can be done, because you can hire officers for events, for concerts, so possibly that could be. But to put up a bunch of signs on all these roads, no parking, and not have any enforcement, I think we're asking for problems. I think you need to show that we're paying attention to it. And I want to add on one point here, Prescale Parkway to Ontario Street. That sounds well and good. They were parked fairly orderly last week. Was the Saturday, I think, the Sunday that I saw it. They were parked fairly orderly along there, but it is a crowd. To move all those vehicles, have all those vehicles move somewhere else, it could create problems for other streets. And I'm talking about where the parquet is, like you were talking about. They were parked all over. I think I counted 20 cars there. But I think we might be pushing the problem just back a little further. But some people aren't going to adhere by that law if no one's around to enforce it. I can keep saying, and I'm sorry to dwell on it, but enforcement is the only way of showing that we mean business. So perhaps we can hire an officer, or perhaps our bylaw officers to do there for those.
And that's why Article 5 of the, or number 5 of the motion does say to add enforcement resources during peak times.
Okay.
Okay. Councillor Bateman.
There you go. Thank you, Mayor. I'm not going to talk about the staffing, so I'm confident the CAO will work that out. I'm glad this is coming because it has been a problem, especially on weekends and long weekends. We've all seen that or heard about it. My question, I've got two questions. The first one, I guess, the planner could probably answer, hopefully, the signage. Is it just straight no parking? Or is it no parking tollway zone? Because when we're talking enforcement, regardless of who comes in, these people are going to be whoever's there deep inside Prescale on one of the beaches. So it's not like anybody that's enforcing is going to wait beside their car. So it's either going to be a ticket situation, the car still sits there, or it's a tollway zone and remove the car. So which way is this bylaw going? Is it just no parking ticket, no parking tow? The other question I would pose to you, Mayor, is anybody going to check in with the provincial government? This is COVID related, 100% with all the beaches around us closed. With all the provincial funding that they've been allocating for different things for different communities that are impacted by COVID, can we or have somebody look into whether we have any funding available to help offset this cost?
I can certainly speak to the MPP about that.
Thank you, sir.
You bet. Mr. Walsh, could you address the first question, please?
Certainly, Mayor, to Council, the short answer is I don't know. But I'd have to take a look at our original parking bylaw again about what we're amending. I believe it will specify what kind of signs. My understanding is that it's really no parking in a fine situation as opposed to no parking in a tow situation. But I can confirm with our bylaw as is currently drafted and make sure that the signs are consistent with that. And this can be a matter that we report back to council on in next session.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Deputy Mayor? Yeah, Laura, you'll have to speak up. I can't hear you.
I can't either.
Can't hear you. Do you want to come into the chambers and I'll vacate my seat and you can speak from my seat?
She can just come here, Tom, if she wants, and I'll step. Laura, you want to just step here? She's going to take my seat, Brent, for a second, Brian. Mayor.
Are you unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so my question is, number one, when the park closes down, shuts down because they're at capacity, they still allow walk-ins, which is what is causing our problem along a lot of these streets, not anything related to Prescale. And I'm just wondering if we've had a conversation with the park about that, if they can provide overflow or if they are going to not allow walk-ins, because that is probably about half of our problem there. So I'm just going to ask my questions, and then so the next question is about the parkette, which is just down the road for me. Yes, people are parking along the road. I'm just wondering about a capacity for that park. I don't know. And also there's swimming going on there as well, which is posted as not being allowed. And then the other thing is also, I do believe as well that if we're going to put this in place, especially just for the next month, we need someone wandering around showing that we are enforcing it. Because, you know, I have no problem with people coming to our community. I welcome it, but we do want them to follow the rules. And I think we just need to be really clear about that.
We'd like everyone to have a little common sense, and when that doesn't happen, we have to create rules so that we force them to. And then, of course, we have to enforce it. I think everyone agrees with that. I did reach out to the provincial park staff, the superintendent. Rob's on vacation this week, so I have left an email for him to respond to, asking if he would have opportunity to sit down with me and any member of our staff who's available when he's available after he comes back from vacation next week.
Okay.
So the short answer is no. The long answer is what you just heard.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Councillor Tadman.
Okay. I understand from talking to people at Pollywogs and Park Place and observing myself, this isn't all about COVID. The word has got out, if you walk in, you don't have to pay for the day. And so, I mean, it's very obvious that the park was not full at 9 o'clock in the morning when they started parking on the sides of the road. So I don't know how you stop that. I understand that there's even walking in, you're supposed to pay a $2 fee or something, but people, and obviously with social media, they found out if they walk in, they can take their barbecues and their coolers and everything else. But the big problem is at night, when the vision is very poor along there, little kids coming home tired, coming to their cars along that causeway. Betty McGill, for instance, was petrified going through there. She was sure she was going to hit somebody. So somebody's got to be there all the time, I think, during the later part of the day. And definitely they have to be ticketed if they are parking, because some people will still do that.
I've mentioned to a couple of people the concept of hiring a security firm to do bylaw enforcement for us, and I'm curious if staff have a comment on that, because I haven't heard whether that's a possibility or not. I'm more worried about the collective agreement and what that would do. So I'd look to Mr. Castleman or Mr. Walsh to make comment on hiring someone for enforcement on the weekends. Mr. Walsh?
Mayor to council, all I can say is that staff will look into that based on resource loads. If we're finding that our current staff aren't able to keep up with demand for enforcement, then we will have to supplement. And if council wishes to make an additional resolution giving staff the authority to investigate that further at its discretion after having assessed enforcement loads, then we're happy to follow up on that. We were a little bit conservative with expenditures, let's say, in making our recommendations and trying to kind of assess the situation and then going from there. So that's been the approach at this moment. But if council wishes to give us a clear indication that we're supported in adding resources as needed, then staff can certainly follow that direction.
Councillor Rowley and LeBlanc, could I add to this motion and further authorize staff to engage an external security firm to assist with bylaw enforcement on weekends?
I was just going to say, can it be added as an amendment? And if that's the case, then I totally support that.
So
I also
I'm
support
hearing
that.
yes from you. You support that as well, Councillor LeBlanc?
Yes.
Thank you. So I will read the full motion before we vote on it, everyone, because we've added 2 items now. Anybody else wish to make a comment, ask a question? Councillor Rowley?
Thank you, Mayor. Based on just temporary no parking, I know we spoke earlier because we don't have it in the bylaw. It's not enforced. So this is going to give us opportunity to enforce that. If over the next while, and this won't have anything to do with this area specifically, but just so that I'm clear on that, regardless of whether or not we put up temporary no parking signs, unless it's specified in, specific areas, we cannot enforce, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So I will read the motion and then I'll call the vote. Moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. The council receives the director's report regarding prohibiting parking along select roadway segments. That council receives the bylaw enforcement officer's report regarding the same, attachment number 1. that council authorize staff to initiate public consultation regarding the temporary bylaw for a period of 2 weeks, after which staff will report to council regarding the findings. That the bylaw presented at this session of council be enacted for the temporary period from August 7th until September 21st, 2020. In order to add enforcement resources during peak times on weekends and after hours, the bylaw enforcement officer is recommended to be subject to an on-call duty for 3 weeks on a call-out basis. This involves standby pay and call-out pay for the actual calls. And further amend attachments number 1 and number 2 to change item 27 to read Huff Road from Lakeshore Road to the southern extent of Huff Road. And further authorize staff to engage an external security firm to assist with bylaw enforcement on weekends. Are there any questions yet? Councillor Rowley.
Just one question, and it doesn't need to be added, I don't believe, but that staff understand as well that we need a little extra enforcement around the Harbor Street Parkette.
That's understood, right, Mr. Walsh?
It is, Mayor to Council.
Thank you.
Councillor LeBlanc.
Through you, Mayor, for Mr. Walsh, I found the collective agreement, if it's like most of them, for 1 hour, for a call out, it's a 4-hour call out. They get paid for 4 hours, even if they're there for half an hour. Can he stay for that full 4 hours, or I think he should be there for the full 8 hours? Because it's a 4-hour minimum call out.
We're going to let staff. We're going to let staff manage the human resources. Councillor LeBlanc. Councillor Anderson. I lost you, Ron. There you are.
I mean, yeah.
Yep.
I agree with Dr. LeBlanc. How about that one? Nobody's come up with that one yet. Anyhow, I agree with Councillor LeBlanc there that by putting it in the motion and leaving it, is that proper? Because I don't feel we want a call out person doing this. But I think it's got to be 100% commitment.
I understand what you're both saying, and I think that we all appreciate and understand your want for this to ensure that we're getting the best bang for our buck, but we want to be following the collective agreement. So we will get our senior staff to manage the human resources expectations to the best of our ability and with the most efficient force and effect for bylaw enforcement on the weekends. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Any further questions? All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That motion is carried. The next portion of our meeting is in closed session. And it's moved by Councillor Rowley and seconded by Councillor LeBlanc that council resolve itself into closed session on August 6, 2020 at 7:09 p.m. pursuant to the Ontario Municipal Act 2001 subsection 239(2)B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including a municipal or local board employees, specifically a performance review. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion is carried, and we'll take a 10-minute recess while we try to reconfigure ourselves in council chambers. Randy, you will park us or put us in the waiting room or whatever the correct term is, please.
That's correct, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Please proceed, your worship.
Thank you. We have risen from closed session and have re-entered our open session. And I have a motion moved by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Bateman, that council approve the adoption of the closed session meeting minutes from the following meetings of 2020, being February 3rd, February 6th, February 18th, March 2nd, March 16th, April 20th, May 4th, June 1st, June 15th, July 20th, and July 22nd. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion is carried. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Bateman, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the corporation of the Municipality of Brighton Council meeting held on August 6th, 2020. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion's carried. And I'll need a mover and seconder that council adjourn at 9:14 p.m. Is there a mover? Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Vink. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Randy.